CR101radio.com, podcasts, and more.
16. Inheritance, barbarism, and dominion. Chalcedon Position Paper, number 121, May 1990. In terms of biblical law, inheritance is a means of blessing godly and responsible children. If there were several heirs, the one who was the main heir received a double portion, the care of his parents, and headship over the others. The parents had a duty to separate themselves from ungodly sons, and, if needed, to participate in their legal condemnation. Deuteronomy chapter 21, verses 15 to 21. If no son were worthy, a daughter could inherit all. Numbers chapter 27, verses 5 to 11. Inheritance was not necessarily by blood, but by faith. Sin leads to the disinheritance of men and nations, and the purpose of inheritance is to further godly dominion. The meaning of inheritance has changed dramatically in the modern age, especially in this century, and dramatically since World War II. At one time, the substance of an inheritance was land and a house, furnishings and a family Bible. I can remember more than 60 years ago when one couple looked forward to the privilege of inheriting a battered old family rocker which had been brought to California about a decade after the gold rush of 1849. I can recall the happiness of others at inheriting a family Bible. Now, inheritance is mainly in the form of money or paper assets such as stocks and bonds. An inflationary era tends to reduce values to paper and to create a society which is rootless and prone to change. One consequence has been a contempt for the values and treasures of the family's past. In the 1950s, I saw a beautiful handmade kitchen table with chairs made of poplar wood sell at a high price. It had been built by a skilled craftsman who settled in a western area in the mid-1800s where no other tree existed. The fourth-generation heir had no use for it. At that time, the dealer commented on this lack of appreciation by an heir. Such incidents are now commonplace. Most heirs want only money, not family heirlooms, treasures, or Bibles. The past means nothing to them, nor does the future. However much education they have, they are barbarians. The modern barbarian may be a university graduate, a scientist, or an artist, a person of prominence or wealth. But he is someone with neither respect for the past nor roots in it, nor any concern for the future. If he receives an inheritance, he wants to liquidate it, to turn it into cash, even as he liquidates the religious and cultural inheritance of the past. What so-called artists like Marcel Duchamp did to the past, the modern heirs do to the family's past. A common street sign of my childhood is now rare, and in many areas never seen. One of the very common signs over businesses and professional offices. A.C. Johnson & Son, C.N. Schaefer & Sons, Emery Williams & Son, and so on. The business or trade was proudly handed down to the next generation. Then, however, fathers began to say in bewilderment that their sons felt almost duty-bound to rebel and to seek work elsewhere. Work of less satisfying character and of lesser freedom. There was a rebellion underway against the ancient forms of inheritance. Family treasures that a father and mother had once proudly inherited were regarded by their children with amused condescension. Family portraits, once part of the parlour, were now junked, as were photograph albums of old pictures. In effect, the heirs were too often saying, "Give us cash, not junk." About the same time, too, the care of the older generation was being transferred from the family to Social Security and Medicare. The older folks were living too long, some held, and euthanasia advocates began to speak out. The return to barbarism was underway. The ancient barbarians moved steadily, looting, raping, and killing as they went. What they could not carry with them, they burned or destroyed. They despised the stability of the peoples they victimized. People who loved work and who remained rooted to family, work, and place. For the barbarian, the stable family and society were there to be victimized. In time, the barbarian premise became the primary article of faith in a sophisticated fashion of the Enlightenment. Denis Diderot, in Encyclopédie, made what T.C.W. Blanning described as the unequivocal demand of Enlightenment thinkers all over Europe. Everything must be examined. Everything must be shaken up without exception and without circumspection. Joseph II and Enlightened Despotism, page 3. This view demanded a disrespect for the past, for the family, and for the church. Destruction became a mark of intelligence and enlightenment. It was no wonder, then, that the Enlightenment led to the age of revolution and the systematic destruction of the past. We must not forget that the Enlightenment and the men of reason despised both the Gothic cathedrals that faith had built and the Alps which God had made. They were both violations of rational premises. The French Revolution was the great open inauguration of the age of revolution, and it introduced, in secular fashion, what the Enlightenment had longed for and worked to create: the modern state, dedicated to anti-Christianity, anti-family in nature, and erosive of heritage and tradition. The modern state began to destroy the past by means of state control of education and by taxation aimed at the destruction of the family and inheritance. The modern state is institutionalized revolution. Given this fact, the inheritance and property taxes and other related taxes should not surprise us. Their purpose is, in large part, the dissolution of the past and present. This purpose requires that wealth, once largely land-based, trade-based, and skill-based, be converted into cash. The state schools teach a disrespect for the family, tradition, and the older forms of inheritance. The school graduates want cash as their inheritance, not the things once prized. The results are sometimes insane. Heirs will at times sell valuable antiques which have been in their family for some time in order to buy other antiques which will not tie them to their past. The Enlightenment heritage leaves them unwilling to be grateful. History, for them, begins with themselves. They do not want grandparents and parents to complicate their lives. Let them die quickly, and let their cash make life easier for their heirs. The purpose of Scripture's laws of inheritance is godly dominion. Hence, we see Ishmael passed over in favour of Isaac, Esau in favour of Jacob, Jacob's older sons in favour of Judah, and so on. The heir had to have not only faith, but a character which was dominion-oriented, beginning with dominion over oneself. The Lord does not want self-indulgent heirs. Again and again in history, he dispossesses men and nations who do not respect their God-given heritage and who assume that the past and its inheritance is there for their pleasure rather than as a stewardship to the future. Thus far, the 20th century has seen a steady return to barbarism. What the 21st century will show remains to be seen. As I have travelled back and forth across the United States since World War II, I have seen townhouses, farms and ranches, some in the same family since the area was settled, change hands. Some farms, 6 and 9 generations in the family, have been lost because a debt-free place was run into debt, or because the heirs wanted a modern, urban life. Rootless people love a rootless life. The past is there to be used, not respected. They may be, and often are, charming, able, and likeable, but they are rootless, and they are barbarians. It was 40-some years ago when a boy, perhaps 13 or 14 years of age, watched a wedding party come out of a church and asked me what they were doing, and why was a marriage ceremony performed, and why was it important? At least he wanted to know, if only in curiosity. But he was a young barbarian with no idea of the importance of the family, its religious meaning, nor its legal protection. Today, millions like him regard a wedding as a time to show off, get gifts, and have fun. The meaning of the family in God's sight is lost to them. They live pragmatically. Things are valuable to them only if they can be used advantageously, not in terms of God and the family. Behind the tinkle of the glasses celebrating the wedding can be heard, if one listens, the footsteps of judgment on this age.